Welcome back to Three Men and a Mystery. I'm John Lorden.
I'm Mike Morford.
And I'm Gray Hughes.
This is episode 6 of season 2, Silenced, the Death of Elisa Gomez. And we've got a real special episode for you guys today. Today, we're going to hear from another family member that's going to take us not only up to Elisa's death, but also into some of the events that happen after that. And this family member is Elisa's sister, Angie Gomez. I really haven't had a loss like Angie has in terms of losing her sister, Elisa, but I know one of the three men has. And Gray, I just wanted to ask if you could give us a little bit of insight into what it's like to lose a sibling.
Well, I mean, it's absolutely awful, as everyone can imagine. 1986, my brother died, and it seemed like it took me probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 years before I actually felt like I could, breathe again, really. I mean, it's such a weird feeling. I mean, when you lose a sibling is, you're expecting to live with them and have them be part of your life, your whole life. When you lose a parent, at some point, you're expecting them to pass away at some point, and it's sort of built in to the way we think. And but yeah, I mean, it's just absolutely awful. You're sort of in this weird fuzzy zone for a long time, where it's hard to laugh at anything, and it's very depressing. And then eventually you sort of learn to live with it, and then you can actually then move on again and become normal again. But it takes a long time, or at least it did for me. I'm sure it's different for everybody.
Yeah, the weight of that loss, I can really feel it when I'm with Judy or Angie, and in particular when we're talking about this topic. There is another side to that, which is when you're talking about Elisa prior to losing her, they really light up also once they hit those good, happy memories. Morph, do you have any insight in terms of losing a family member like this and how it affects you?
Yeah, I've only lost, older relatives, grandparents, and in-laws and stuff like that. Haven't lost anyone younger, but we have to consider too, this is not just losing them through a tragic accident or something. This is something that's mysterious and possibly involves foul play. So there's a whole nother thing there to consider. But I've talked to so many people that have lost siblings in tragic ways, and to homicides and other unexplained ways. And that pain seems to stay with them forever. I don't care if it's 2 years, 20 years, 30 years. When I talk to these people, some of them are still like it happened yesterday, and that void is there and it's real.
Yeah. I also just wanted to say a big thank you to Angie for, of course, doing the interview that we're going to hear today, but also for calling in to the live stream and helping us close that out. I know how tough it is for her to talk about this, and she is extremely brave as we get into the interview that you guys are going to hear today. So I actually interviewed her in July of 2019. So during the course of this interview, if you ever hear her refer to this year, she's actually referring to 2019. So let's start by hearing from Angie what Elisa was like as a sister and a little bit about their childhood years together.
Elisa, as a sister growing up, since my parents were divorced, my mom worked full time. And so it was me and her after school. So I was like the second mom. And so we only had each other to depend on. And so sometimes she didn't want to do things like chores, and then I would end up doing them. So she liked to get out of stuff because she was the younger one. And but growing up, we were really close because it was just me and her a lot. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was the age difference?
4 years.
4 years.
We're all 4 years apart. My favorite memory growing up with Elisa is probably our times at our cabin. We had quite the road trip in the car a lot of times, so a lot of fighting in the car between sisters. But up at the cabin was some of my favorite times up there. As you know, we would spend the entire days with our cousins in the beach, in the water, in the lake, and We would walk up to Trails End, which is a resort up there. And so those are probably my favorite memories.
Where is the cabin?
Reamer, Minnesota on Big Thunder Lake. Well, probably some of the toughest moments. A lot of times we had our differences. She was very opinionated. If you said the grass was green, she would say, no, it's not. And she wouldn't give up till she got her way. So I would say just in general that there wasn't one time in particular. Just in general, we had sisterly stuff, so, but other than that, I think probably one of the most difficult times was when she got pregnant with Jade. But I was there to support her in every way. And during the birth, I was there, in the room with her for Jade. So, but being single and young, that was really tough for her. I noticed her artistic talent way back when she was young. I mean, when we were growing up, that's all she did. And she would make things out of weird things. Like, we didn't have a lot of money growing up, and we had a box one time. She made a Barbie house out of this box. And so we had this Barbie house out of a box, and she would just make crazy stuff out of stuff all the time. So I think way back as a child.
Wow. Wow. I'm sure that helped in terms of just growing up and having fun and stuff, having a sister that could do things.
Absolutely, yeah. And then sometimes I'd be like, that's so weird, but it was artistic, so. Yeah. Elisa has been an animal lover her entire life. In fact, I have quite a story about that. When we were kids and my mom was at work, we were home alone a lot. The apartment we lived in faced a marsh, and there are ducks there a lot. And one day she decided she was going to let all the ducks in our house so that she could feed them. And I stood back and laughed and said, wait till Mom gets home. There was duck poop all over the floor and everything. I just stood back and laughed. So that was just her. So, so way back.
And you were sure to let your mom know that it was just her.
You could not let her know because it was everywhere. So, yeah.
Now, how else did this love of animals manifest?
Well, she also had a gerbil named Elvira who, going to the cabin, we had to take that gerbil in the car, going to the cabin, and I fought it, and I had to sit in the back seat with that gerbil. So, yeah, and we had to take her cats to the cabin with us, and yeah, so it was for her whole life, whole life.
Wow. How many animals do you think that she rescued?
Oh, I have no idea. Yeah. Not a clue. I don't know if anybody has that number. Yeah. So that'd be a great number to find out, though.
Yeah, I know just looking through her Facebook that I saw numerous stories of her doing things for different shelters and just regularly helping.
I would like to know that number myself of how many animals she rescued, but I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
Lisa's biggest accomplishment, I believe, was becoming a mother. Because, when she got pregnant with Jade, she was just so uncertain and so young. And then she had Jess, and she just became a really good mother against all odds, In fact, my daughter, I know she had a soft spot for my middle daughter because she's kind of the same way. Told me she'd never have grandkids, or I'd never have grandkids, and she got pregnant real young. So they had that in common, and I think she had that soft spot for my daughter that same way. But I do think her kids were her biggest accomplishment in life.
Now, you said something earlier about a daughter having a child. Do you have a daughter that's pregnant right now?
I do have a daughter that's pregnant right now. Do any day.
And do you want to tell us about the baby's name?
Her name's going to be Elisa.
That's one of the sweetest things that I've heard since I've had the privilege of knowing you guys.
It was surprising when she told me, but also a blessing. But hard to hear. It'll be very hard to say that name, even though it's my grandchild.
Yeah.
It's a bittersweet thing. But I'm absolutely so blessed that she chose that name.
I imagine it is going to be extremely hard to have that name be said again in the family, but it is also such a great honor. One of the things that really struck me in that segment was her talking about Elisa and saying that she wouldn't give up till she got her way. And I think that's such a hard point about this case, particularly for the family, is looking at it and trying to figure out, there's no way she could have done this. We know her personality. This is someone that was a fighter. She was a scrapper. She wouldn't have gone out like that. And once again, her sister's just echoing that with that story. What about you guys? What'd you notice in that segment?
Well, the part that really hit me was the naming of the child's going to have the name Elisa. And the thing is my after my brother died, my younger brother, as we grew up, they had their first son, and they named him Garrett, which is his name. And that it was just such a great feeling. It's a little bit weird when my mom, because she used to always say Garrett, I mean Grant, and now there's the Garrett's back in there again, so right. She'll get it causes that confusion again. But it's neat to have a nephew named Garrett.
Morph?
I just think all the little stories helps us to get to know Elisa a little bit. What kind of person she was with the animals and the arts and how creative she was. I think we've thought that all along, but to hear her sister reinforce that, it gives us a chance to sort of know her a little bit, even though we didn't know her in life when she was alive.
I wish there was some way that we could figure out a number in terms of how many animals she helped save, but it's literally started in her childhood. I mean, you hear her, she's letting the ducks into the house. So I'm pretty confident who knows, it could be somewhere in the hundreds. From what I saw on social media, she was just so active in that way. All right, let's continue with more. We're going to hear more about Elisa and a slightly different version of what happened that morning after Angie heard from Sharon. Did you ever see her depressed at any point in her life? Like clinically, seriously?
Not clinically. We all have times where we're down,
yeah.
But not like that.
Okay. Was there any periods in her life where she got caught up with drugs or alcohol?
Drugs or alcohol? I have never seen that from her. As a teenager, we both had some house parties that we got in trouble for. And yeah, I know she did that because my cousin Mike helped her do that. So he would laugh about that right now. But other than that, no.
Okay.
No.
But she didn't necessarily push people away that were into those things.
She tried to help some people. I mean, we have some close family who's been troubled that way, and she tried to be there for them. Okay. So,
had Elisa ever talked to you about Sharon, about their relationship or what she was like? Was it just a roommate?
It was more of just a roommate, and I know she was trying to help her out because she did that a lot with people. She even took my own daughter in, at times. She took my cousin in at a time. So I think at that time she was just trying to help her out.
What do you think of Sharon at this point?
What do I think of Sharon? I don't have very good feelings about her because I know she has lied. Because when we went there, she gave us a different story than she did the police and whoever else she spoke to. I have many not so nice text messages from Sharon, messages in Facebook, So I don't have a very good opinion of her.
Can you clarify the differences in stories that she told?
When the day we first went over there, which was the Wednesday after, she told us that she thought he did it. Then she took her story back. And then she said something else. Then she said she wasn't there. Then she was there. Then she said, I went to bed. But then now we find out she was up all night with Brad. And, she has never gave a clear statement. If she has, we haven't gotten it. So.
Did she ever give you the version of events where she took Elisa down from the scarf?
Yes.
And can you tell us how she told you that?
The story she told us was that she saw Brad sleeping, walked downstairs and found my sister hanging, and she went and told Brad, and he said, she's been dead a while, cut the bitch down. And Sharon says she went, grabbed her, took a fingernail clipper and cut her down. But yet there's no fingernail clippers marks on the scarf. The investigators tell us that the scarf is intact. Then they tell us there were marks, but clearly from the footage, there's no marks. And she said she had to grab her to cut her down, but yet we've been told no DNA of anybody else has been found on her. And we were told even if somebody grabbed somebody, their DNA would be on them. So obviously that's not the truth either. So.
When did she tell you, was it when you first spoke to her that she told you about this?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But that's at the time where she's also telling you that she thinks Brad's involved.
Mm-hmm.
So she thinks that he is responsible for ending Elisa's life, but then she goes and takes her down?
None of her stories add up. None of them.
Did her and Brad stay in contact after all this?
I have no idea.
Okay. Did you ever find Sharon to be helpful?
Not once.
Wow, a lot to unpack there. And once again, we're wondering about the information that we're hearing from Sharon. Angie's pretty clear. She's hearing several different stories. But now the conditions of these stories are completely different than the other ones that we've been hearing. Even the story that Sharon directly told investigators that we covered on the last episode. In this version, Sharon makes the discovery of Elisa and then goes and tells Brad about it, and he already knows about it. And then to say it in that way, cut the bitch down, really, really strikes me. What do you guys think about all this?
I think at best, you've got some very unreliable people there. And at worst, you've got something being covered up, and hence the story's trying to change to be lined up properly and stuff.
Right.
I mean, it's Sharon actually is, I guess she's quoting Brad when she said, cut the bitch down. I mean, that is probably the coldest thing I've ever heard, especially since they just got married earlier that day, right? I mean, or I guess the previous day.
Yeah.
But, I mean, who would say that? A psycho.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And what really is starting to kind of nag at me about this case a little bit is we're hearing all these variations in stories. We have a couple things that we can lean on. We've got tape of Sharon saying this. We've got media posts where she's saying that. We're hearing from the family. She's also, accused Brad in the past. So it's so clear that the story is not consistent, that someone is lying for some reason, but we have investigators just kind of almost take it at face value and then move on. There's even some stories in their own documentation that are showing there are wildly different versions. I literally just bumped into another one this past week doing more research on this case, and we'll cover that in a future episode. It's a completely different version of what's happening that night. Wow. And even using their own information, I just don't see how we don't keep this case active and keep looking into it to see why they're being lied to. I mean, someone's being lied to here, and it includes the police. Let's hear Angie discuss what happened the day of the wedding and hear her theory on what actually happened that night. Okay, so we know they get to the courthouse on this snap decision. They're going to get married.
Yeah.
Likely that happened that morning. What happens after the courthouse?
From what we know, they went to celebrate at the bar next door. I can't remember the name of it. I think it's Cedar Inn.
Okay.
Yeah. So they went there and had drinks on my sister's credit card. And what we were told is then they went back to the house. And then Brad called his buddies over and my sister was upset.
So you've seen security footage from this place.
Yes.
Did you see Sharon's boyfriend in that footage?
No.
Is there anything else interesting about that footage that you noticed?
Brad and Sharon leave together. I have a theory about what happened, and I feel pretty good about it. There are a lot of things unanswered. They took a wedding picture at midnight. She had a wedding dress on. That wedding dress has never been found. We've asked and asked and asked about it. It's never been found. I believe Brad is a con artist. He doesn't hold a job. And like I've told my mother, he's good at what he does as a criminal because that's what he knows how to do. Just like me and you go to work, we have our profession. That's what we do. This is what he does. He's done it not only to an ex-wife, he's done it to my sister, he's done it to other women. He's looking to get something. And I believe that he talked her into getting married quick. She wanted to be married. She wanted to be married and got married and realized what a mistake it was. She jumped the gun. And I think she confronted him that night because he had friends there who were drug dealers and she didn't like it. And they got into an argument. The neighbor heard her, called 911. 911 never came, didn't do anything about it. They said they drove by. And I believe that Brad killed her by strangulation. Set her body downstairs and tried to make it look like she killed herself, but he made a lot of mistakes.
So one thing that I can help clear up just a little bit of, I've reviewed a lot more information since this interview. The picture with the wedding dress that they think was taken at midnight, I believe that picture was actually taken earlier in the evening. It was sent to, I believe it was sent to Judy, if I recall correctly, at around midnight. But I have been able to review some of Elisa's phone records, and I can see that she was sending that same picture out earlier that evening as well. So, and we know from the Cedar Inn footage, she's not wearing her wedding dress when they actually go to the Cedar Inn. But it's still a big question of where is that dress? I mean, a dress that was so important to Elisa, she decided to wear it to the courthouse for her wedding. And of course, it hasn't been found. There's also some questions about her shoes. I don't think I really kept them in with this interview, but there's a pair of her shoes that was seen moved to different locations throughout that day. She was discovered, and then seems like those shoes might have disappeared as well. What did you guys notice in this segment?
Everything she's saying about Brad is just stuff I've already been thinking, but she's sort of reinforcing, almost like her and I are on the same wavelength about what might have happened. And I don't know how I can come to any other conclusion by the end of this case that at the very least, this guy Brad is just a scab of a person. Whether he's a murderer or not, that's not for me to determine, but I think it's pretty easy to see that he's a real scab of a person.
Gray?
Yeah, he seems like a grifter type with violent tendencies. I wonder why the police didn't actually go to the house. They may have seen the broken fence and the phone on the ground, and then maybe then would have entered the house and made sure everything was okay.
Absolutely.
That's like a big blinking light saying, please come check on me, because there's been a melee out in the front yard. You can only imagine what happened inside.
Yeah, and I don't want to drive too hard towards any particular like conspiracy theories around this or anything, but is it possible that the police department is worried about the fact that they didn't stop by the night before and they just kind of wanted this case to be closed and just roll away from it. I think it's something that we could consider. I mean, like I said, I don't think it's conspiracy where, some chief heard somewhere, what, you guys didn't stop by last night? Make sure this is a suicide, make it go away. But I just think in the context of, once they did the research, they knew that there was a 911 call there the night before. They checked that log and saw that the police didn't actually do a physical stop. They literally just drove by and said, oh, the fight isn't happening anymore. Could that have influenced them? I think is a fair question.
A little bit of a CYA, cover your ass.
Yeah. Or, cover your company's ass or your organization's. Yeah.
There's definitely other cases like that where I think even like the, you could say Jonathan Cruz, even DJ Vicky in a way, like they just had the 911 operator in that case had him grab the gun and move it around. And then Jonathan Cruz, they move things around. There's just other cases where you sometimes wonder if they're just not pushing forward because they know that the shoddy work would come out if there was ever a trial.
Yeah.
And
I do think you have to wonder about that. And
it would make them embarrassed. And so they sort of, ooh, man, we really want to, let's try to move forward and get out of this.
Yep. So. Let's continue with Angie's interview and learn about what they found when they actually got into the house and what would wind up missing from there.
But when we go there on Wednesday, we didn't, Sharon is there and her two little girls are there. And Sharon is speaking to my mother, and one of her little girls tugs on my shirt and says, "Did you see the blood?" And I said, "What blood?" And she points out speckles of blood on the wall on this couch that Brad was supposedly sleeping on. That couch disappeared also. Don't know. It's gone.
Was there any open wounds found on Elisa?
During her funeral, I noticed she had, it looked like a nail mark like this on her hand. But the report says she had, some on her legs, like bumps, cuts and bruises on her legs. But they never mentioned that. But I noticed that during the funeral. And then she had a big bruise on her forehead. So...
Was she, some people, depending on what they do in terms of activities, or sometimes people are just clumsy and they'll have bruises all over them. Was she known to have bruises on her legs regularly?
No. She had rough feet because she liked to walk barefoot a lot too. So, But no.
You had previously mentioned mistakes made in terms of how he set her body.
Right. The doorway he says she hung herself from is about, as I'm going to say, between 5'6" and 5'8" tall. Her body was found already down, face forward, with her legs extended way out of that doorway, face down. Now, if Sharon were to grab her and she fell, she wouldn't fall just her chest over the front of the stool and her legs extended perfectly straight out backwards. That doesn't make any sense. The scarf that was found has no tension on it. There's a knot on the bottom of the scarf, and they say that in the report that it was some kind of a, I don't know the term they use, but a very nautical knot that was on there. And she was no kind of Boy Scout or sailor, I can tell you that. But the knot is on the bottom, no tension, there's no cut marks, and there's just a lot of things that don't add up.
I think the big point I key into on that segment is the legs being extended perfectly straight. I do think it's odd. I think it looks odd because of the lividity that we've talked about with Dr. Laura on that. It shows that her legs were probably likely bent at some point. So why would you straighten out her legs? I have no idea. If she was in a fully suspended position, which I don't think is necessarily the case, but assuming she was, Angie makes a really good point that if you had literally cut this person down, they're going to crumple to the floor. They're going to fall straight down from there. So what's the mechanism by which her legs are all of a sudden kicked out perfectly straight like that. I don't know. Any other things that you guys picked up on this?
It's just a buildup of just different things going on there at that scene that just seem like they're adding up to no good.
Speaking of scene, Angie's now going to tell us about the day that Elisa was discovered, how the house wasn't exactly locked down like you would figure a typical crime scene or even just a death investigation scene would be. Let's go ahead and continue with Angie. How long after her passing was it before you were able to get into the house?
Well, Tuesday when we got to my father's house the next day, while we were there, after my mother had spoke to Brad, I was getting phone calls from her friends saying, we're in the house, there's this, the dogs aren't here. I'm like, why is anybody in the house? Why is the house open? I said, is the house wide open? They go, yeah, we just walked in. So I called the police and told them what happened. And I said, I'd like you to meet us down there right now. And me and my mother got in the car and went to her house that night, Tuesday night. We didn't go in. We talked to the officers that say they answered the 911 call the night before. And they said they drove by. And I said, why is this house not taped down? Why is it wide open? I didn't understand at that time. And at that time, I did not know that they were there for 40 minutes and left Jade there, that morning and never did anything else. I assumed the house would be like closed down, taped down. No, wide open, people running in and out of it. And so they, at that time, went and locked the house down. And that was 10:30, 11 o'clock Tuesday night.
Wow.
The first time we walked in the house was the next day, Wednesday. Me and my mother and father went.
And what'd you find?
That's when we talked to Sharon. And she said, looked at my mother with tears in her eyes and said he had something to do with this. And that's when the little girls tugged on me. He wasn't there. But yeah, that's the first day we had, and it was a mess in there. And so.
What do you mean by a mess?
Just like, there was a party that had been there. Not like he destroyed the house afterwards, but just you could tell there had been a party there or something. But yeah. Mm-hmm. When
you say he destroyed the house afterwards, what happened?
So because he married her that night, we were told by law, got her house, her business, her car, everything. We were not allowed to go in that house because it was supposedly his. Well, he destroyed the house to where the city of Minneapolis had to condemn it. We found over 200 spray paint cans in there. They spray painted the walls. One of the spray painted walls said, "Till death do we party." Right next to it, it said something about being tied down. The owner had turned the water off, so they were wiping feces with towels. It destroyed it completely. Mm-hmm.
How long after?
There was needles there, just months, within those few months after. Everything was gone when he trashed the house. There was nothing left of hers. Mm-hmm. We went there, tried to find a few things, and we got a few things out of her house, just a few.
Any other items that were missing from the home related in particular to the investigation or that you think would be important to the investigation?
Well, the police never took the fingernail clipper that Sharon says she cut her down with, so we don't know where that is. Her wedding dress, don't have any idea where that is. And everything else was just destroyed and taken from the home. I mean, everything.
Yeah.
The kids were not able to get anything from their home they grew up in.
And we have a few pictures of the house for viewers on YouTube so you can see it for yourself. Certainly what looks like a disaster. Also keep in mind, we had Elisa's bank account, which was emptied within a day or two after her death. Here is a picture of the quote, "Till death do us party." And there's the other quote that Angie mentioned that's written on the window frame. And at least part of what's written down there seems to be lyrics from a song called "Stepping Stone" by a band called Head PE. Not exactly the type of music that I listen to, but on the window it was written, "Like I won't tie you up and effing rape you." And other pics show that this place was more than just ransacked. I mean, it looks like it was ransacked and then just people brought in a bunch of trash on top of it. I mean, it's an absolute mess. What do you guys think of these photos?
This house is reminiscent of every bad movie I've seen that involves a crack house or a meth house. I'm picturing a scene out of Breaking Bad or something with somebody like that living there, and the police, getting back to her sister's point of just not
locking it down and getting the clippers, and just I just you can't go back in time, but God, I just feel like that was a monumental mistake to not lock that down.
Well, how do you think the death till do us party? Yeah, how do you think that was created? Because it looks like a miniature spray paint thing, or like it was done with a stencil.
Yeah, I don't think it's done with spray paint necessarily. And when I look at it, she obviously is an artist. I think there's a lot of things in the house. As a matter of fact, in that same picture, if you look in the closet, you could see what appears to be a red plastic cup, like a silo cup, that has a bunch of paintbrushes in it. Possibly. It's kind of hard to tell from the photo, but I think those are paintbrushes. It looks like there's some other tools that are in that closet area. And to the left of the graffiti, you can see there is a can of spray paint right there. And there's also rubber gloves that are on a stool nearby. When I first saw that, I was wondering, I was like, is someone huffing in here? But I can't imagine I think that maybe the gloves were part of her art supplies as well. So when I look at that "Till Death Do Us Party," I think it's something else. It could even be lipstick. That I would assume could be done by a lady, possibly. Mm-hmm. It doesn't look very masculine. It's got kind of bubble letters that are going on with it, and the color. I don't know. The writing under the windowsill. I mean, that looks like any kid off the street could have come in and done that. So
next we'll find out what Angie thinks of the investigation right after this short break.
A lot of us struggle with finding happiness, dealing with tough life issues, and so much more. But you don't have to struggle alone, and you don't even have to leave your home to get the help you need, thanks to BetterHelp Online Counseling.
BetterHelp is available on desktop or mobile for both Android or iOS. You can speak to a counselor via text, chat, phone, or video.
Find secure, convenient, professional help that's affordable with BetterHelp.
BetterHelp isn't a crisis line, but you can find licensed professional counselors that you can speak to from the comfort of your own home.
3 Men and a Mystery listeners get 10% off your first month with discount code 3MEN. So why not get started today? Go to betterhelp.com/3men. Financial aid is available to those who qualify. Simply fill out a questionnaire to help them assess your needs and get matched with a counselor you'll love. That's betterhelp.com/3men. Find help to break through those personal obstacles with BetterHelp. Welcome back, and please keep in mind that our sponsors are helping us raise funds that will go towards investigating this case further and honoring the life of Elisa Gomez, so please show them the same support they're showing us. Let's continue with Angie as she shares her feelings about the initial investigation. What are your feelings towards law enforcement?
I believe that we were done very wrong, treated very poorly, and that they didn't do their job. When we first met with them, they said, we have lots of suicides in this town. And so that's what we treated it as, a suicide. Those were their words to us the first time we met them. They have since said, no, we treat every place as a crime scene and I just, there is not one proof of evidence that they treated it as a crime scene at all. Jade came there that morning to meet her mom because they had made Monday night, they had made plans together to meet for breakfast Tuesday morning. And so when she showed up, they were taking her mother's body out. And the police just left her there with Brad. They were there for 40 minutes and left. And, you know, there were many times that Officer Jensen was so rude to us. At one point, I said, you know, we know that the kids were there. The kids weren't there, he said. I said, we were there when the kids were there, and Sharon told us her kids were there. He said to me, oh, now you think the kids did it? I mean, this is days after we found out she died. And I just told my mom, grab your coat, we're leaving. I mean, we were treated like a criminal rather than a victim. The medical examiner does have a different opinion, although they have told us they're not the police, so they can't determine murder, but their determination said ligature strangulation, not to rule out by the hand of someone else.
Now, just to make one clarification, I think when Angie's saying that the police were there for 40 minutes, she might be talking about the first responders and the initial team, because we do know that the detective interviews that we have with Sharon and Bradley are later that morning. And obviously those interviews between the two of them, that goes on for at least another hour. So I think she's referring to the initial response. But certainly it sounds like the conversation with Detective Jensen didn't go so great. What do you think, Gray? I saw your reaction during that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sister was actually trying to just say, hey, there's kids here. Maybe they heard something. And then he comes back, oh, so you think they did it now? That's ridiculous. You know, that's really unprofessional. And I don't really understand why somebody would ever say something like that. A police officer.
Yeah, I'm a big supporter of law enforcement, but it pisses me off when I hear that police officers don't have empathy for family members, even if the family members think something that might be totally out there. You know, be kind to them. They've just experienced something brutal, and if you don't believe them, you don't agree with them, that's fine. Just keep it to yourself and do your investigation the way you see fit. But it just bothers me when we hear about, you know, family members that are treated this way. And I think one thing we need to touch on too is that medical examiner leaving open the possibility that there was foul play. We've got to point out that we have reached out to that medical examiner a couple different times now and haven't gotten a response. So if anybody out there listening has any pull and can make that happen, we're here, and we'd like to hear from them.
Absolutely. You know, Judy, of course, has been listening to the show as the episodes roll on. And she asked me specifically, you know, did you show the documentation where the medical examiner said that to Dr. Laura? And I think for some reason she was assuming that Dr. Laura wasn't really considering the possibility that this was a staged scene. But I've had plenty of conversations with her both on and off the air, and that certainly isn't the case. But it's actually on a different write-up where he does note this, the medical examiner, and he does specifically say it, ligature strangulation at the hand of someone else. They basically can't rule that out. And I think that's a very important determination, and that's part of why it's still stuck at that mode of could not be determined. It's really not classified, at least from the medical examiner's point of view, as either a homicide or a suicide.
Is it always like that? I mean, it'd be great to hear what it is that makes the medical examiners say that they can't rule that out. Because obviously they can sometimes, right? Well,
and you have other professionals that are looking at this and saying there's no indicators that it's a homicide. You know, we don't have some of the typical things that you see in a strangulation case. But yeah, for Dr. Jackson to go that way about it, I'm curious. What's the thing? Is it just because there's that chance, or is there something that he's noticing in particular that's making him reserve his judgment? Yeah.
And that's why it would be great to be able to talk with him and
absolutely. Or even just to communicate an email, just to give us a little bit of an explanation about how it gets stuck in that categorization. That would be very helpful. Well, when we're looking into cases like this, there's all kinds of other effects that it has on the family that's left behind. And here, Angie's going to tell us about an upcoming family event that's raising a lot of very tough feelings. So you've got a big day coming up.
Yes, I do. I am getting married September 28th of this year.
And is planning a wedding bringing up any hard thoughts or feelings about Elisa?
My other sister, Maria, will be my maid of honor. And I have my aunt standing up for me also, which should be somebody else. But we have a candle that will be burning in her memory up front.
Was it tough trying to reconcile with the fact that she didn't have you at her wedding?
No, because no one was there. It wasn't hard that I wasn't at her wedding because I didn't see it as a wedding. I really don't. My mother wasn't there. My father wasn't there. My other sister wasn't there. Her son wasn't there. Nobody was except Jade. And so, no. I don't see that day as a wedding for her. That's just me.
What items do you have to remember her by?
I have some things of hers that I'm lucky enough to have gotten. Jade and Jesse picked out some jewelry for her for the funeral, which they got that week, fortunately, before every item she ever had was taken. So the jewelry she wore for her funeral, I still have that. I was given that. And her last painting. Her studio, she had a studio at MCAT, and me and my mother were in touch with her, I don't know if you call it director, professor, whatever it was at the school. And she was emailing us back and forth and told us when we were ready that we could come and go through her studio. So me and my mom and Jade went, we picked a day and went down there and went to go clean out her studio. And that was a really hard day. Her heart and soul was in that room.
Outside of her art, did you find anything special of hers?
Yeah. She had her art boots that Jade put on right away. They had paint all over them. She slept there sometimes, so she had a sleeping bag there. She had portraits, like photography she had done that we didn't know she had done, that was there. There was a lot,
And what happened with the art?
We took it that day. We took it all home. We decided who was going to get what. Jade actually donated some back to the school. They had a show. There was a lot of art supplies that Jade donated to the school for students. So, nice. But that's where, like I say, her whole heart and soul is in that room.
And that final portrait that Elisa was working on has been basically the art that we've been using for this season of Three Men. On every version of the YouTube show, you're seeing part of that portrait at the start of the video. Gray, did you have some thoughts you wanted to share here?
Yeah, I just was struck when I was listening to Angie there that you can tell that how a death in a family affects every single thing that you do for years, and it really never goes away because every time there's a holiday, Christmas, Thanksgiving, weddings, you're always missing that person and thinking they should have been there. And it's that part really struck me right there.
Yeah. I also just wanted to say for the holidays, we did also get a card from Judy written to the three of us. And for some reason, she made a donation to the show. And she says that she wishes she can give us so much more to each of us, but that she wanted to thank us so much for everything that we're doing with this. Elisa was cremated, and the family found a very special place to take her back to. As a matter of fact, it's a place that you may have heard of earlier in this interview.
Jane and Jesse wanted to spread her remains in Montana because they had taken a trip there with their mother. And she had said something to them someday. She wanted her remains spread there. But it's been a couple years, and it's been hard for them to come to terms to do anything with them. So we have said when they were ready, it's completely up to them. And finally they decided they weren't going to make it to Montana, and that the next best place would be up at our cabin. And so hard.
I know.
On her birthday this year, which was June 20th, my mother, my father, my sister, and Jane and Jesse all met here, got into 2 cars, and we drove 3.5 hours north to the cabin. I had a really hard time that morning. I just didn't know if I was ready. And all I could think about was my mom having to grab that urn and put it in her car. No parent should have to do that. And so when she got here, I just had a breakdown. I just wasn't ready for it. So we got up to the cabin and got on the end of the dock, and Jane and Jesse wanted to go for a walk to decide whether to do all of her remains or save some. And when they came back, they said all of them. And they wanted my dad to actually spread the remains. And so we stood on the end of the dock at Big Thunder Lake, and my poor father had to open that and put him in the lake. And that was just really hard to watch my dad. And we just, all of us just held each other close and watched. And it's hard to move forward. And as much as we've grieved, I don't think that our true grieving has even started. I think we've been robbed of that because we've been so determined to have somebody behind bars for this. And Brad should be behind bars, is what I think. And I have watched our system allow him to be getting off scot-free, and not just this, but other crimes. And I don't understand it. 2 months after this happened, he got picked up, being chased from the cops. He was drunk, had no driver's license. He was in my sister's new Jeep. They chased him. He crashed into cars and trees. And when he went to court, they kept him in jail till court. And when he went to court, the judge said, I understand you don't work, and I'm sorry for your loss, and we're going to fine you $50, but we're going to waive it because you don't work and you have no money. And he walked out. My son, who went to the Navy, a couple months before he went, he forgot to pay a parking ticket, and they came after him like he was the worst criminal on earth. This 18-year-old kid had to pay almost $400 for an unpaid parking ticket, who was going to serve for our country. But Brad gets off every time they pick him up. They just let him back out. I don't understand. I don't understand it. I really don't. When he was picked up on his way to Texas, and he got picked up in Oklahoma, he was sent back here to Minnesota, was supposed to be in jail this year till November, and on some miracle got an early release in March. And so he's been out of jail. Even though he fled the state on parole, even though he had to be sent back, even though he's got a record a mile long, he got an early release. When somebody asked me if there's a possibility she could have done this herself, or if I truly believe a crime happened, I would say in a minute, if there was any question and I thought she might have done this herself, I would be trying to let my mom know, Mom, there's this and there's that. But the evidence is not there for that. The evidence is so clear that he did this. I mean, we haven't been through everything we know, but all we know, it is so cut and clear, and that it's just disgusting. He walks. And my sister has had, not an easy life. So she's been through things before. She would not let him, she wouldn't leave her kids over somebody like that. No. She might have thought she loved him, but her love for her children way outweigh anything for anybody else. And she would never make plans with her daughter to come there so that she could find her hanging. She would never in a million years do that to her daughter. No.
What other plans did she have around all this?
Well, Jess had just gotten home from deployment, so he was still being detained, like the military does, and he was coming home the next week for his birthday. She hadn't seen him, like I said, in almost a year. So, yeah, there were a lot of plans going on. Mm-hmm.
And a friend also?
Yes, she had a friend coming who actually was being called at the airport to fly in and being told what happened. Mm-hmm.
So what do you want to see happen with this case?
What I want to see happen with this case is, first of all, Hennepin County and Minneapolis telling us we haven't done a thorough investigation, and you deserve that. She deserves this. First of all, that's the first thing I want. I don't want an apology. I'm not looking for that. I just want them to say, you know what? We did a few things wrong. Let's try to make it right and look into this a little bit more. At least that. But in the end, I want him to be charged and be put in jail for what he did. I know he is a perpetrator of women, and he won't stop. So unless he gets stopped, it's going to happen again. That's what he does. Just like I said, me and you get up, we have our coffee. This is his life, and this is what he does. He is not going to stop.
When I've been discussing this case with some people, and we talk about that aspect about Brad seeming to have a really easy time in court despite his criminal history, some people are even wondering, could he be an informant of some kind or have some kind of special privilege? It's almost baffling. I get their frustration. I don't know. How does he get off 6 months early going through all that with his history? It's just, I don't know. Have you guys ever seen anything like that?
It's so frustrating. No. I've covered a case on the Murder of My Family this week where the person committed a robbery and a murder, shot a 21-year-old guy on the street, and come to find out he's got a violent history with 30 arrests. And I just don't know how these people are walking the streets sometimes when they have an established history of violent crimes. It boggles my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you know what? When I was listening to that, I was thinking, I agree with her that the circumstantial evidence is just so compelling and overwhelming. Like just how he is, all the different elements. And I think that what's just missing is that little forensic link. Mm-hmm. But I think if you could almost go to trial if you could get Sharon to say what she really knows when she originally said that she thought he did it, because that's really it's pretty strong information. But
my biggest fear with that, Gray, is that she's so unreliable that a good attorney would get her testimony just thrown out.
That's how I feel too. I think it would be too easy to impeach both of them, quite honestly. It's like the same argument I have for why the police should be looking at this stronger is because you guys are obviously being lied to. But then how do you use that in court outside of just impeaching the both of them? So where are you going to get your source of information from to move this case forward? I get that this is a really, really tough thing to process.
It really sucks because you can hear it in her voice that she's so frustrated because they're picking up the pieces and he's just walking free after committing yet another crime. It's just.
And there was something I wanted to touch on. I think Morph brought up early is I did mention that I had a brother that died, but we all knew how he died and everything. Yeah, I think it'd be so much different if you were in a situation where you're in limbo. You'd never get to move on. You just kind of keep trudging through the misery until you get an answer. And sometimes you don't ever even get that answer. So you have these families of unsolved cases that 30 years later, they've never even really got to grieve. You know what I mean? Like they just want justice and it never comes. And I'm hoping that we can figure out something in this case.
Yeah. How do you process it? Because you've got these pieces that are left unsaid and undone and not understood correctly. So how do you process it all emotionally? Obviously you can't. You just, Angie spoke to that very directly. Yeah. She doesn't think that their grieving has even started. When we wrapped up, Angie had one more very specific thing that she wanted to tell me about. Anything else that you want to touch on before we shut everything off?
Just one thing. As I said, my son is in the Navy, and he went in September 2017. So it was almost a year later. And it was also his birthday, the day I had to bring him to boot camp. So my whole family met to go out for his birthday and for his goodbye. And we all went into the Yard House in St. Louis Park. That's his favorite restaurant. And there was no music playing. And we all sat down. It was me and my mom and him and my daughter. And we were waiting for a couple others. And we sat down. And the minute we sat down, Breathe started playing. And that's what we played at her funeral. And so we all just said, she's here. Mm-hmm.
Angie was referring to the song Just Breathe by Pearl Jam. The lyrics of that song start with, "Yes, I understand that every life must end. As we sit alone, I know someday we must go." I think that last clip with Angie tells us that even though we must go, we'll always find a way to stay connected to the people that we love. Once again, a very big thank you to Angie for being so open and sharing all of this with us. And if you are struggling with thoughts of ending your own life, please don't hesitate. Call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. It's there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Please join us on the final live stream on Wednesday, April 8th at 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern on my channel, Gray Hughes Investigates. And make sure you hit the notification bell or the subscribe button and the notification bell. And also, I think this is, about 1 month before CrimeCon.
That's right. Which we're all going to be at. So if you want to come spend some time with the three men, head out to Orlando for CrimeCon. You can find out more about the show at www.threemeninamystery.com, and that's with the number 3.
If you have any feedback, corrections, or new details, those can be sent to us via email at 3men@3menandamystery.com. That's with the numbers 3. Or you can reach out to us on Twitter with the handle at 3menandamystery, or find us on Facebook. If you're looking for another true crime podcast to listen to while you're waiting for the next episode of 3 Men and a Mystery, consider the True Crime Files. Here's a sample.
Hi, I'm Christine, and I'd like to introduce you to the True Crime Files podcast, a bi-weekly podcast that focuses on mysterious disappearances and unsolved murders. Every 2 weeks, we'll be releasing an episode that'll help you get to know a case really well without having to invest a lot of your time. Derived from the articles up on the True Crime Files website, you'll find that our show covers a diversity of victims and perspectives. You'll probably also notice that our episodes are narrated by Scott Fuller from the Frozen Truth and Status Pending podcasts. Be sure to subscribe to the True Crime Files today so that you never miss an episode. Thanks so much for listening, being a part of our true crime community, and helping to shine a light on cases that might otherwise be overlooked or underreported.
3 Men and a Mystery is produced by John Lorden, Mike Morford, and Gray Hughes.
If you would, please rate us on the podcasting platform that you found us on, and help us grow by telling your friends and family about us.
On the next episode, we're going to hear the story from Brad himself as he's interviewed by the homicide detectives on the day that Elisa is found. Please join us again in 2 weeks. I'm John Lorden.
I'm Mike Morford.
And I'm Gray Hughes.
And we are 3 Men and a Mystery.